No, hang on. Better. One of the great joys of my teaching career has been to coursing, or the willingness of people who do things outside of what I think students see as the traditional music classroom. If you don't know, I teach 7th grade music. Yes, I do it voluntarily, and no, I didn't know what I was getting into when I did it, when I started, but has been the willingness of people kind of outside that sphere. Sometimes students see music teachers and music class as sort of this standalone thing, and telling students and giving them the opportunity to see that people do music in real ways outside of a music classroom is been one of the cool joys of my teaching experience. And so I'm always thankful for people like Jesse and other musicians that we invite into our classrooms, and they come and see the joy of middle school music life. And during first quarter, Jesse told the students, he said, I have 2 new songs that I want to play for you. And as soon as he started, the one you just heard, I was in the middle of sermon prep, and I thought, okay, he's definitely going to need to sing that on our sermon Sunday. And as I was singing it in my head, a lot of times I kind of transition that word time, and I put in the word hope, because time for farmers is a lot of hoping and wishing and praying. I guess I have the clicker. All right, so my sermon today is called A Shoot from a Stump, the Stubborn Soybeans, and a Lesson in Hope. I want to show you this picture. This picture has a lot of mixed emotions for me. If you don't know, my husband and I and our 2 girls live on my parents' farm, but that farm came to my father and his brother by way of his parents. So this is a 3rd-generation farm that we are tending and I would say cultivating for whatever comes next. And one of the things that has not really changed in all that time is the family garden. And as a person who hates to garden, I just lay that out there. I confess to you, I hate to garden. The only reason I enjoy gardening is because I know that my freezer will be stuffed full of fruits, or stuffed full of vegetables, and my canning jars are now full of really wonderful things to eat. But I don't like gardening at all. Seems like a waste of time, and I could rather be swimming or doing something else, much more fun. But anyway, one of the things that really hasn't changed a whole lot is our gathering together as a family to plant soybeans, otherwise known as edamame. And this is a whole process. I don't know if any of you have ever taken the time to harvest or plant soybeans, but we start sort of in March, and in March there's the planning phase where all of the women on the text chain have to decide when is the optimal planting time. What seeds are we going to buy? Are we buying the 60-day seeds or the later seeds? What vacations are coming up? We have to prepare around all of these things so that when the planting happens, there is really a timeline all the way into September. After we plant, it usually takes us a good hour to plant as a family, as an extended family, I should say. And then we wait for the seeds to sprout. And during the first days of the pandemic, when we thought really the pandemic was only going to last about 2 weeks, I thought to myself, I'm really going to need something for Annika to do that gets her outside, because I, as a teacher, was still teaching my classes and preparing for the next week or the next day and grading papers. So I told her that she had to make a garden chart. And every time we planted in the garden, she had to make a row in her chart. She had to label what the plant was going to be, and then every week she had to take a photo. And I remember the first about 4 weeks, the photos were pretty similar to each other, until that first day when you said, oh, there's a shoot, it's coming, the sprouts are coming. Then, the disappointment phase. You rejoice in the shoots, but then the disappointment. Last year, I made a really big blunder. You're supposed to put unused seeds in the freezer. Someone told me to do that. I just didn't do it. I thought to myself, what does it matter? The freezer in the shed outside, it can't be, there's no big deal, right? Big deal, yeah. The seeds won't grow. So half of our seeds didn't grow. So we'd planted 7.5 long rows of seeds. Half of our seeds didn't come up. So we bought another pack of seeds, and the decision was made we were going to plant them individually, and then we were going to water them individually. 3.5 rows of watering individual seeds. I was not sure that I really wanted these soybeans by the time we were finished. Then there was the time when the seeds sprouted and it was beautiful and the shoots were coming up. We were getting so excited. And in one night, the groundhogs came and flattened them. I mean, it was heartbreaking. I just remember looking outside in the morning, and where had been beautiful plants were just nothing. And then after the seeds come up, if they come up and the groundhogs don't get them, then you have to pull the weeds. Weeds are so persistent, and they're so good at what they do. They find those little crevices, and some of them look just like soybean seeds. So you'd be going down the road pulling, and your grandma would, be right behind you saying, "Oh, that was a soybean plant you just pulled out. Let's try to replant it." It's just so many things. And then there's the hoeing. So this picture was taken a week before our wedding. I don't know too many brides who are excited about hoeing the garden the week before their wedding, but our wedding was on the farm, and it was decided that the soybeans had to look nice, and also it was time to hoe them. So we thought, well, we're all here, we might as well just hoe the soybeans. So this picture is I look at that with real fondness because it's about, I think, 4 generations in the garden, and some of those people aren't here anymore, but it also makes me think, ugh. So farmers, gardeners, and people who are gardening reluctantly know that farming is a lot about hope. So what does that have to do with Advent? Well, our text today is a familiar passage from the book of Isaiah that is often used during Advent. And if you're like me and you grew up in a household with a tape player, my mom had the 2 cassette disc of the Messiah. Anybody else have that? And you'd get quarter the way through, you have to flip the tape and put it back in. So when I was growing up, there were 5 tapes that we played at Christmas time, and the Messiah was one of them. And it just was on repeat along with the 4 other tapes that were being played. So most of us, even if we don't know that oratorio, we know this scripture so well. We've heard it over and over and over again. And I think sometimes that really works to our disadvantage because we don't really hear it like the people in Isaiah's day heard it. We hear it with the backstory of Christmas and the backstory of who Jesus is. We know the ending to the story. We know that the seeds will sprout and grow. And I found that when I went and looked at commentaries, a lot of the commentaries do the exact same thing. They don't really focus on what was happening during the time that these words were spoken. They push us right ahead to the New Testament. They push us right ahead to Christmas. They push us right ahead to the end of the story. I think we forget that people for hundreds of years lived without knowing the answer to that story. So what I'd like us to do is I'd like us to listen to Isaiah's words. And I'm really thankful that my daughter Annika agreed to read for us today. So she's going to come forward. The scripture today is from Isaiah 11, 1-5. You can look right here. Okay. Do you have it turned on? Okay, go ahead.
A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From his roots a branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of might, the Spirit of the knowledge and fear of the Lord. And he will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes, or decide by what he hears with his ears. But with righteousness he will judge with the needy. With justice he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. With the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Righteousness will be his belt, and faithfulness the sash around his waist.
Thank you. So how did the people of Isaiah's day hear these words? I would suggest their life was really different than ours. The kingdom of Israel had been split in half, and the northern kingdom was already in exile. They had been captured. The kingdom of Judah was still not captured. However, they were actively choosing to defy God and who he was. They were worshiping idols. They were practicing injustice. And God came repeatedly saying, "Please come back to me. I have something so much better for you." There was also a very fast-changing and volatile international climate, which feels really real to me today. Babylon was becoming more powerful, and they were starting to challenge the Assyrians who had been in power for a long time. And so in the mix of all of this uncertainty and all of this injustice, even though the Israelites were being punished for some of their choices, God, through these scriptures, is inviting them back to himself. He began to promise a Messiah, someone who was going to set things right and bring a different kind of kingdom. So I want to see if you can, within that lens, hear this scripture again from a different translation. A green shoot will sprout from Jesse's stump, from his roots a budding branch. The life-giving Spirit of God will hover over him. The Spirit that brings wisdom and understanding, the Spirit that gives direction and builds strength, the Spirit that instills knowledge and fear of God. Fear of God will be his joy and his delight. He won't judge by appearances. He won't decide on the basis of hearsay. He'll judge the needy by what is right, render decisions on earth's poor with justice. His words will bring everyone to awed attention. A mere breath from his lips will topple the wicked. Each morning he'll pull on sturdy work boots and build righteousness and faithfulness in the land. I think if I'd heard those words in Isaiah's day and I'd been displaced and I was dealing with injustice and there was a world so full of uncertainty, they would have made me so excited, so hopeful, and so ready. I was be ready. But if you listen carefully, God is only promising what? A shoot. He's not promising a fully ready garden, an instant solution. He's just promising a shoot. In essence, what he's providing is a time of active waiting. Just like the soybean shoots in our garden, the shoot is fragile, it is vulnerable, it is open to attack, and worst of all, it is easy to forget. But many who heard those prophecies, yes, some of them forgot, but many passed them down to their children and grandchildren. And the waiting continued, and the shoot was nurtured. That lasted for hundreds of years. Thankfully, I don't have to wait that long for soybeans. But hundreds of years later, the hope is realized in a completely unexpected way. So I know you're all wondering, what happened to those soybeans? We're at the plant, the plants are up, now what's going to happen? And you think to yourself, this is easy, right? You pull the shoots out, you pop the beans, and you put them in your freezer. Well, no, soybeans are particularly obnoxious because the pods are too hard to, lost my words. They're too hard to get out until you cook them. So we've tried many cooking methods over the years. We tried boiling them on the stove. We don't have enough stove space, and someone's kitchen is always dirty. So we finally found an Amish family who are friends of ours who have a huge vat with a fire underneath where you can cook lots of soybeans in a very quick time. So first you have to cut the plants. Then you have to pull the beans off the plants. Then you have to wash the seeds. Then you have to boil them for several minutes. And then when they're really hot, you have to pop them. And after that, because Grandma was incredibly meticulous, you washed them and then laid them out on cookie sheets till they were dry before you bagged them, and then began the process of deciding who gets how many beans. A very mathematical decision that has to be made among all the families. And then after that, there's iced tea, hard pretzels, and Munster cheese on the porch. Our active waiting was realized. But we're now in a time of active waiting. So as we enter this Advent season, what does the hope of a coming Messiah look like in our world today? Is it like this picture we often think of, destruction, our world being eaten by pests, very little vegetation left, so much disappointment? If so, can you see the shoot? It might be very small. And then let's try to imagine in this time, how do we reconnect with that shoot? How do we once again begin to really feel the intimate hope of who Jesus is and the excitement of his coming? For those of us who have lived Advent many, many seasons, how do we get excited like the children to light that next candle? And then after that, how are you God's hope in this world? How are we continuing to share the message that a king is coming who will put things right, even when we don't see it, even when there is so much that is wrong? Maybe one might say, it's time to get ready to savor the soybeans. Amen.